Hi, if you're a returning viewer, welcome back. And if you don't know me, my name is Sinister Sons. I'm a medieval fantasy illustrator with a fixation on knights and armor, and I also love world building. My favorite way to world build is to start with my characters. So today, we're redesigning another one of my D&D NPCs, as well as making her a study. The designs I create in this video will help me further flesh out the monarchy of Emmerich, one of the nations in my D&D inspired fantasy setting Reclaimed. Also, quick announcement, I currently have commissions open. I have some set price character commissions up, as well as full illustrations and modular props, which can vary in price. If you're interested, there will be a link in the description and pinned comment where you can learn more. Alright, with that out of the way, let's get designing. Pyra Emmerich is not only a princess in the northern monarchy of Emmerich, but the head of its royal guard. Her family rules within Wintergrown, a village established during Ardea's rebuilding phase, which would later grow into Emmerich's capital, and they're known for their thirst for knowledge when it comes to Ardea's history, especially Emmerish history. Pyra is no exception, but during her childhood sword fighting lessons, she discovered she had a natural talent for the discipline. Not only that, she loved it. The sport specifically. She's not nearly as squeamish around blood as she used to be, but she still isn't a fan of actual conflict. Though that's not to say she avoids combat if the situation demands it. She also keeps up with her princess duties, like attending meetings and balls, which she enjoys most of the time. Other than that, she helps out her parent, Monarch Cedric, with their research on Emmerich's history, usually in the form of flying off to nearby towns or ruins to gather information. Wait, she can fly? You may ask. And yes, Pyra has wings made of fire. She's something called Flame Touched, meaning that she was gifted the power to control fire in various ways by Aguilacer, the sun god. Since Reclaimed's gods are represented as birds as well, it made sense that wings would be part of the package. While this gift is exceedingly rare, Pyra isn't the only person like this. She's just the most well-known. Aside from its inherently extraordinary nature, people find Pyra's gift a little odd, given that Emmerich's patron deity isn't Aguilacer, it's Iskar, the god of the moon who's associated with ice and winter. This gave me the fun challenge of trying to combine motifs from both gods, as Pyra would worship them both. I specifically had to push the elements of her design related to the moon, like her cool-toned armor and its engravings, as her original design had very little of that. I think I probably could have done more, but I'm super happy with how she turned out, so I don't really want to change anything right now. Like I mentioned earlier, Pyra was taught sword fighting growing up, like the vast majority of children in Emmerich. Beyond the occasional injury from her training and teasing from her older siblings, she never had to deal with much hardship, being a royal and all. She was set up to enjoy the life of a pampered Emmerish princess, attending extravagant events, feasting on expensive meat and honey mead, fencing with her siblings, all within the safety of the castle walls. That would all change once Aguilacer gifted her powers in her late teens. At first she was overjoyed. She had heard tales of people with control over the forces of nature all her childhood, but thought they were nothing more than stories. She knew it would take her a while to master her power, but once she did, the possibilities for what she could do felt endless. Overnight, she went from a typical Emmerish princess to a living legend. What she didn't anticipate was the reaction from her family, as well as their subjects. The new expectations, responsibilities, reverence, the last of which she thought she would enjoy, but swiftly realized how people started seeing her less as a person with extraordinary abilities, and more as extraordinary abilities attached to a person. In her mid-20s, she's still figuring out how to navigate the world as the only known living person of her kind. Her siblings' jealousy certainly doesn't help, but Cedric manages to keep them in line and checks on their daughter frequently. So why was Pyra chosen by Aguilacer rather than Iskar? I do have a reason for this, but before that, I've also got a confession. It may be kinda obvious at this point, but I'm gonna explain it anyway. My world building and character creating process is almost entirely, at least in the beginning stages, informed solely by concepts I think are cool or interesting in some way. I wanted a character with fiery wings and a greatsword, and so Pyra was born. I think this is a perfect way of going about creating worlds when it comes to personal projects specifically. This ensures I'm actually excited about the things I'm creating so that I'm motivated to develop them, and I like the challenge of having to fit things together like a puzzle. I'd be much more deliberate about what I'm doing for a professional project though. So again, why was Pyra chosen by Aguilacer and not Iskar? Pyra is confident in herself, passionate when it comes to her discipline, and in general tends to motivate and inspire those around her with just her presence. These are all traits that resonate with Aguilacer far more than Iskar, who's a much more reserved deity. In fact, Aguilacer is commonly associated with combat passion and confidence in one's abilities. I imagine Aguilacer saw Pyra's potential and decided, oh yeah, this one's perfect. I don't care that you're Emmerish, you're getting fire powers now. Aside from educated guesses, no one really knows exactly why or how the gods decide who to give these powers to. Maybe I should have some concrete reason behind the scenes, but I think the mystery is much more interesting for both me and others. Is the power earned? Is it luck? Is it based on personality? Is it totally random? Who knows? I don't think I would have come to this conclusion about the gods, their gifts, or even just Pyra's personality without starting where I did. I didn't start with, I need a magical princess character who has command over and trains the royal guard. I started with, Cool fire paladin lady with wings and big sword. This process actually feels similar to creating an NPC with rolling tables, something I learned about from IOOPS. Put it very simply, the dice give you a conceptual jumping off point, and referencing your other characters as well as your world, you fit the pieces together from there. If you want to see this process much more in depth, go watch IOOPS' design with dice videos. Alright, back to Pyra's design. Also, I got sick in between recording this, so if I sound weird, that's why. I was originally going to design her day clothes in this video like I did in my previous design video, but given how long this has already taken, I decided against it. She'd wear something like one of the dresses from this mood board though. Speaking of that mood board, I included quite a few references of more Viking-like armor than what I ended up with. I think when I design her helmet, I'll make it look more like one of these to pull some of that influence back into her design, since I think Viking helmets are pretty distinctive. Given that Pyra can literally control fire, I doubt she would get very cold despite living in an incredibly cold climate. However, because of the Viking influence, fur was an absolute must for some part of her design. Fur, along with being very warm, was a marker of status for Norsemen in the Viking Age, so it's only fitting. I tried giving her a huge fur collar, but that felt like it interrupted her silhouette in a way that I just wasn't a fan of. It kinda took away from the shape of her afro puffs. Instead, I made it so that some of her armor had fur peeking out from underneath it, and that her gambeson was lined with fur on the edges. I have no clue if this is realistic for an actual gambeson. I don't think it is, because that would be incredibly bulky, but I love how it looks. I also wanted Pyra to present more feminine than my other characters, so I elongated the gambeson and had it drape in a way that makes it look like a woolen skirt or a dress. In this painting, she's wearing her hair in her everyday style. She loves to wear gold eye makeup and put little gold beads and rings in her hair, but that isn't really practical for wearing a helmet, so she changes her hair pretty frequently. About every 2 to 3 months or so. When she's about to fly out into the wild or directing a particularly long training exercise, she has Cedric or her servants braid her hair back into cornrows. I have drawn these cornrows once before, but not for this particular video. Oh, I just got the idea to have her cornrows be in some kind of pattern related to, Emmerich's crest, or maybe the gods? Next time I draw her with them, I'm absolutely gonna design that. Her sword was, I won't lie, designed pretty dang quickly. Even so, I like how it looks. I saw some references of great swords, Zweihanders I think, with this neat ring just below the hilt. It reminded me of a sun or a moon, so it seemed perfect to include. Given how flashy Pyra's design is when she has her wings out, I didn't think that the sword needed to be all that complex. Other than the sun, moon looking ring thing, the gold pommel, and the size of the sword, it's fairly generic. Her wings are the star of the show, and I wanted them to stand out the most out of everything else. Okay, that's all I have to say about her design, so here's some quick facts. Pyra is really subtly inspired by Valkyries, more in vibes and visuals than anything else. She's one of the only 2 cis characters I have who are essential to the story, and she's a lesbian. Her parent in the monarch of Emmerich, Cedric, is non-binary. Originally, her and Cedric were written to be siblings, but I wanted to have an older character ruling a nation since Alark is only like 30, so now Cedric is her parent and 50-ish years old. Here's their design that I did for a class a while ago. She does have a mother, but I haven't designed or written her at all yet. Pyra is besties with the Royal Guard's captain, and they often hang out at Vragi's Axe, a high-end tavern situated in the Guard's ward of Wintergrown. He's a little arrogant, but she feels at ease around him because he doesn't deify her like a lot of her subordinates do. That brings us to the end of Pyra's design. Now onto her study... library? Thing. Okay, for the room design, this design was hell, honestly. I'm still figuring out the most enjoyable way to paint interiors, and I think it'll end up being a process much looser than this was. I still think it looks good and gets the job done, though. I tried doing this in Procreate because of its perspective grids, but quickly realized that a 3D model, even a rough one, would speed this up immensely. I threw together this rough model in Blender, exported a render of it, and painted over it in Art Studio Pro. I made sure it was in an orthographic view as well, just to make drawing objects easier. I wanted to use this room to determine how the rest of the castle would look, so I broke out some Viking history books and started Googling to figure out what kind of building materials they would have had access to, how they constructed their buildings, how they were laid out, what kind of objects could fill space, etc. I didn't follow history to a T since this part of Emmerich, the West, is supposed to be a little more removed from its roots as opposed to Eastern Emmerich, where I've stuck much closer to how Vikings actually lived. I decided on light wood floors to contrast the darker wood of the furniture and roof, and to contrast Alonsonian architecture, which utilizes much more stone than Emmerich does. I did go with granite for the walls though, because apparently there's a lot of it in Scandinavia, and I thought it was a nice contrast to all of the wood. A lot of the objects I placed around the room, like the helmet on the bookshelf, I took directly from one of the history books I have. The rest relate to Pyra directly, like the papers and books scattered on the tables. She often makes quite a mess when doing research. So, as you saw, I started with color and then switched to grayscale so that I didn't have to worry about color alongside all the other stuff I had to do. This meant I had to color everything later, and I did that primarily with gradient maps. I like painting on flattened layers, so once I finished the values, I cut out sections of the image and clipped gradient maps onto them. For example, I selected all the chairs, cut them out from the flattened layer, then pasted them onto their own layer. I then created a gradient map and clipping masked it onto the chairs, then messed around in the gradient map editor until I found colors that I liked. For some sections, I set the gradient maps layer mode to color, which retains values from the grayscale layer. This was my first time trying this, and I think it worked pretty well. It's definitely easier than trying to think about color and grayscale at the same time while painting. Here's our finished designs for Pyra and her study. This video is a perfect excuse for me to hone in on Pyra's character, mostly her personality, as well as how God's given powers work in my setting. She'll also act as a visual jumping off point for the future Emerish NPCs I create, especially those within the nobility. For her study, I can already imagine her and the officers of the Royal Guard gathering around that giant table in the center to discuss tactics or conduct research. Or her reading over boring paperwork in that chair in front of the windows. If you'd like to see more of my characters and art, you can follow me on my Instagram and TikTok. And as a reminder, I have commissions open which can be viewed on both my TikTok and my Instagram. Thank you all so much for watching. Remember to like and subscribe. Okay, bye.